I own you, old man. Every judge in this city works for people like me. That is what he said, right here, in my courtroom in Providence Municipal Court, to my face. I have been a judge for a long time. I have seen arrogance walk through that door before. I have seen rich kids in expensive shoes act like the law was something that happened to other people, but I had never, not once in all my years on this bench, heard those words spoken out loud with that much coldness. He was 24 years old. His name was Preston Vael. He stood in front of me wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's rent. His hair was styled like he had a team of people working on it that morning. His watch had a face bigger than a silver dollar. He had a lawyer next to him who looked more nervous than Preston did. And Preston? Preston looked bored. Bored. In my courtroom. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I did not always sit in this chair. I grew up in a neighborhood where people worked hard and still struggled. I became a judge because I believe every single person who walks into this courtroom deserves fairness, not based on their last name, not based on their bank account. Fairness, plain and simple. So when Preston Vael looked at me with those flat, empty eyes and said those words, "I own you," something shifted in that room. You could feel it, like the air changed. If you believe that justice should be equal for everyone, no matter how rich or how poor, you are going to want to see what happens next. Stay with me. The case was called at 9:47 in the morning, case 2026 TR00891. My bailiff, Officer Thomas Reedy, announced it in his steady voice, and the room settled. I looked down at my papers, and then I looked up. First, I saw Marcus Dean. Marcus was 51 years old. He was a school crossing guard, had been for 9 years. Every single morning, rain or shine, sleet or snow, Marcus stood at the corner of Birchfield Avenue and Lyle Street with his orange vest and his stop sign, and he made sure children got across that road safely. He drove a 2009 hatchback with a bumper held together with zip ties. He told me later that he had been saving for 3 months to fix a cracked side mirror. 3 months to fix one mirror. Marcus was in my court because someone hit that car while it was parked, smashed the entire driver's side door, and then drove away. Then there was a bribe attempt. I will get to that. Marcus sat in the gallery with his hands folded in his lap. He was wearing his Sunday clothes, a blue button-up shirt, pressed slacks. He had come here expecting fairness. That is all he wanted, just someone to hear the truth. Then the doors opened and Preston Vael walked in. He did not walk in the way most people walk into my courtroom. Most people come in quietly, a little nervous, a little respectful, even the ones who should not be nervous. There is something about this room that reminds people of the weight of what happens here. Preston walked in like he was arriving at a restaurant where he had a reservation. He looked around like he was sizing the place up. His lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Gerald Fox, hurried behind him, adjusting papers and whispering. Preston did not look at his lawyer. He looked at me, and he smirked. I said, "Good morning. Are you Preston Vael?" He said, "That would be correct." I said, "Mr. Vael, you are here today because your vehicle, a white Meridian SUV registered in your name, was identified leaving the scene of a hit-and-run accident on March 6th. The vehicle struck a parked car belonging to Mr. Marcus Dean. Do you understand the charges?" Preston glanced at his lawyer, then back at me. He said, "My people are handling it." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "My team. They handle these things. This should have been resolved already. There must have been some kind of clerical error." I kept my voice calm. I said, "Mr. Vael, there is no clerical error. You are standing in front of me, and I am asking you if you understand the charges." He said, "Sure, fine, yes." The gallery was quiet, but I could feel the tension. The woman behind Marcus leaned forward just slightly. A few people exchanged glances. That first moment of disrespect, those 2 words, "my people," landed like a small stone dropped in still water. I gave him a simple warning. I said, "We will proceed with respect in this courtroom, Mr. Vael. Do you understand?" He gave me a look that said he heard me. Whether he understood was a different matter. If this story is already getting under your skin the way it got under mine, drop a like right now. Because what is coming next is the moment I will never forget for as long as I sit on this bench. Officer Reedy submitted the first piece of evidence. It was a parking garage security camera, recording from March 6, 9:18 in the evening. The footage was clear. You could see a white Meridian SUV pulling out of a narrow exit lane. You could see it clip a parked vehicle on the left. A hard clip. Not a gentle brush. The parked car rocked. The SUV paused for 2 seconds, 2 full seconds, and then accelerated away. I looked at Preston. I said, "Is that your vehicle?" He said, "Vehicles like that are very common." I said, "The plate number matches your registration, Mr. Vael." He said, "Plates can be duplicated. People do all kinds of things." His lawyer touched his arm. Preston brushed the hand away. I said, "Are you telling me you did not drive that vehicle on the night of March 6th? Preston straightened his blazer. He said, "I am telling you that whatever process is required, my father's legal team will address it. This court does not have the resources to fully investigate something like this. No offense. No offense." He actually said that. I leaned forward just slightly. I said, "Mr. Vael, let me be very clear. This court has every resource it needs to deliver justice today. Your father's name, your father's money, and your father's legal team are not relevant in this courtroom. Do you understand?" Preston looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I understand that you think that." That is when I knew we were heading somewhere very dark. I called for evidence too. Officer Reedy approached with a printed transcript of a phone call. It had been submitted by the Providence Police Department as part of the investigation. The call took place on March 8th, 2 days after the accident, between Preston Vael and a private contact listed in his phone as Councilman V. I will not read the entire transcript, but I will tell you what it said. Preston told this contact, and I quote from the official record, "The crossing guard thing needs to disappear. Just make a call. You know how this works." The crossing guard thing. That is what Marcus Dean was to Preston Vael. A thing. I looked up from the transcript. I looked at Marcus. He was sitting perfectly still, but his jaw had tightened, and his hands, which had been folded quietly in his lap, were now pressing against each other hard. I looked at Preston. I said, "Mr. Vael, did you make this call?" He said nothing. I said, "Mr. Vael, I am asking you a direct question." His lawyer leaned over and whispered something. Preston sat back. He said, "I was stressed. People say things." I said, "You called Mr. Marcus Dean, a man who has protected children on this street for 9 years, a thing that needed to disappear. Does that sound like stress to you?" Preston looked at the ceiling. I introduced evidence 3. It was a voicemail, played through the courtroom speakers, clear audio. It was Preston's voice. He had called Marcus Dean's cell phone directly on March 9th, the morning before the court date. The voicemail said, "I will make it worth your while to not show up tomorrow. Just don't come. Name your number. People like you can always use money." The room was dead silent after that voicemail played. People like you. I let those words sit in the air for a moment. I watched them land on the people in the gallery. I watched them land on Marcus, who closed his eyes for just a moment and then opened them again and looked straight ahead. And then Preston Vael leaned forward, put both hands flat on the table in front of him, and said it. "Judge, with respect, I own you. Every judge in this city works for people like me. My father built half of Providence. You want to keep your seat? Make this go away." 10 seconds. That is how long the silence lasted. 10 full seconds. I counted them, because I needed every single one of them. Someone in the gallery made a sound that was not quite a word. A sharp exhale, then a murmur. Then the murmur grew. Officer Reedy raised one hand and the room went quiet again. But the quiet was different now. It was the kind of quiet that comes before something important. I looked at Preston Vael, and I felt something that I do not feel often. It was not anger, not exactly. It was grief, because standing in front of me was a young man who had been given everything, everything, and had learned nothing. I said, "Order," and the room obeyed. This is the part where everything changes. But before I continue, subscribe so you never miss a case like this one. Stories like this need to be heard, every single one of them. Preston Vael, I'm going to speak to you directly now, and I want you to listen carefully because everything I say is going on the record. You said you own me. Let me ask you something, Preston. Where were you on March 6th when Marcus Dean was standing in an empty parking garage looking at the caved-in door of the only car he owns? Where were you when he called his insurance company and found out his deductible was higher than the repair estimate? Where were you when he had to borrow his neighbor's car just to get to work the next morning so 23 children could cross Birchfield Avenue safely? You were making phone calls, trying to make a man disappear, a man who has never hurt anyone, a man who has spent 9 years making sure other people's children come home safely. You called him a thing, Preston, a thing, and then you offered him money to stay home because you thought that was all it would take. You thought every person in this city had a price. I want you to hear your own words back. You said, people like you can always use money. What does that mean, Preston? People like Marcus, people who work, people who serve, people who do not have a father who can make calls. Is that what you meant? You also said, I own you. Let me explain something to you about this courtroom and this bench. No one owns this chair, not your father, not his money, not his buildings, not his lawyers, not his contacts. This chair belongs to the people of Providence, every single one of them, the crossing guard, the grocery clerk, the nurse who works a double shift, the kid who walks across Birchfield Avenue every morning, trusting that someone will be there. Those are the people I answer to, Preston, not you. You walked in here this morning looking bored. You looked at this room like it was beneath you. You looked at Marcus Dean like he was an inconvenience, and you looked at me like I was something you could move aside. I have seen arrogance before, but yours is the kind that comes from never being told no, never facing a consequence, never sitting in a room where your father's name means nothing. You are 24 years old, and you genuinely believe that the rules of this world do not apply to you. That is not confidence, Preston. That is damage. And I am not saying that to be cruel. I am saying it because it is true. Your father may have built buildings in this city, but Marcus Dean built something too. He built trust. Every single morning, in rain and cold and wind, he showed up. That is not a small thing. That is a big thing, one of the biggest things a person can do. You do not own me. You do not own this court. And you most certainly do not own Marcus Dean. Now let us talk about what happens next. Preston Vael, here is your sentence. First, the financial penalties. You will pay $4,200 in full restitution to Marcus Dean. This covers the full repair cost of his vehicle, a rental car for the duration of the repairs, and compensation for the hours he missed from work dealing with this matter. This payment will be made within 30 days directly through this court. There will be no delays. There will be no legal maneuvers. 30 days. In addition, you will pay a court fine of $3,000 for the hit-and-run violation. You will pay an additional $1,500 for the attempted bribery of a victim. Yes, that voicemail constitutes an attempt, and it is documented. Total financial penalties, $8,700, payable within 30 days. Second, your license is suspended for 18 months, effective immediately. During that suspension, you are not permitted to operate any motor vehicle in the state of Rhode Island or any neighboring state. If you are found driving during this suspension, you will face immediate arrest. No exceptions. Third, community service. And I want you to pay close attention to this part, Preston. You will complete 240 hours of community service, not at a charity gala, not at a fundraiser with your name on a banner. You will report every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7 a.m., to the Providence Department of Public Works. You will work alongside city employees doing maintenance work, cleaning, hauling, physical labor. You will wear the city vest. You will clock in and clock out. A supervising officer will verify your attendance and submit weekly reports to this court. You will also spend 12 of those hours, specifically on Fridays, at the Birchfield Avenue crossing, standing beside Marcus Dean, watching what he does, watching how he shows up. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will observe, and you will understand in your body what service to a community actually looks like. In addition, you will write a handwritten apology letter to Marcus Dean, not typed, not composed by your legal team, your hand, your words. It must be a minimum of 2 pages. It must acknowledge what you did, what you said, and what you understand about why it was wrong. This letter will be submitted to this court and reviewed by me personally before it is delivered. Now, about what you said to me directly in this courtroom. I own you. That statement, made in open court in front of witnesses, constitutes contempt. That means disrespect to the court so serious it cannot go unanswered. Officer Reedy, please approach. I watched Preston's face change for the first time that morning. For the first time, the boredom cracked. His lawyer stood up fast and said something about an appeal. I said, "Mr. Fox, sit down," and he sat. Officer Reedy stood beside Preston. I said, "Mr. Vael, you are being held in contempt of this court. You will be remanded to the Providence County holding facility for 48 hours. A review hearing is scheduled for March 29th. At that hearing, if you can demonstrate to this court that you understand the gravity of your words and actions, you may return to the terms of this sentence. If you cannot, we will revisit every part of what I just read." I watched the handcuffs go on. Preston's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Not one word. That silence, right there, was worth more than anything money can buy. Now I want to tell you what happened after. Preston Vael spent 48 hours in that holding facility. His father's lawyers filed 2 motions. Both were denied. At the review hearing on March 29th, Preston came in differently. No blazer, no smirk. He sat down, and when I asked him if he had anything to say, he looked at Marcus Dean and he said, "I am sorry, I was wrong about everything." It was not a speech, it was not polished. His voice cracked on the word wrong. He completed every hour of his community service, all 240 of them. The supervising officer told me Preston showed up early on most days. He did not complain. He did not pull his phone out. He worked. On one of those Friday mornings at Birchfield Avenue, a little girl ran up to Marcus and hugged him around the waist, and Preston Vael watched that, and I was told he had to look away for a moment, because he finally understood what he had tried to make disappear. The handwritten apology letter was 3 pages long. Marcus told me he read it twice. He said he was not sure he was ready to forgive, but he said he felt heard, and sometimes that is where healing starts. After court that day, I sat alone in my chambers for a few minutes. I do that sometimes, just to let the weight of the day settle. I thought about what Preston said. I own you. And I thought about why those words made the room go silent the way they did. Not because they were shocking, but because somewhere some people have started to believe they might be true. That justice bends for wealth, that power protects certain names, that some people are above the rules simply because they have never been told otherwise. My job, the reason I sit in that chair every single morning, is to remind everyone who walks through those doors that none of that is true here. Wealth is not a verdict. Status is not a sentence. And dignity is not something you earn by the size of your bank account. Marcus Dean showed up every morning for 9 years. He stood in the cold and the rain so children could cross the street safely. That is not a small life. That is an honorable one. And honor, in the end, is something no one can buy, not even a billionaire's son.